Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. Ukrainian Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. It's day 328 of our fight for freedom. And the topic of our today's briefing is the cybersecurity and prevention of cyber attacks. But right before this briefing, we've just faced a cyber attack on our information platform committed by Russia. We understand they don't like to hear the truth about this war, but we're not to be stopped. We are online, we're broadcasting, and I want to introduce our next speaker. It's Yurii Shchyhol, the head of State Service for Special Communications and Information Security. So, Mr. Yurii, let's start with this event that just happened. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear journalists. With this event, everything the Russian hackers managed to do was to postpone our briefing just 15 minutes. So, in fact, they're just postponing the end of their country. And I think it will happen really shortly. So, let's proceed to cyber attacks. The threat of some Russian Federation, it did not disappear. Their number is growing. And starting from 14th of January, just 3 days ago, we in fact have the anniversary of the First World Cyber War. It's not only our opinion, but it's the opinion of our international partners, because the number of cyber attacks suffered by Ukraine and all the civilized world that supports Ukraine, there was no equivalent number in history. Just for the last year, we were able to identify and document 7 new types of viruses in Viber, and within year 2022, mostly are the civil spheres, logistics. They attack with their missiles our critical infrastructure. They attack our critical infrastructure with their cyber warfare as well. 557 cyber attacks were committed against government agencies, and you can see the rest of the statistics on the slides. So their main purpose is the acquisition of details about logistics, the personal information about the government officials and regular civilians, is the destruction of critical infrastructure and information and psychological warfare. The most popular mean is the dissemination of a malicious warfare using just regular emails. So we call everybody to take it responsibly, to take their cyber hygiene responsibly. So it's the work of every single person, because all of you, each and every one of you, is the element which is responsible for the overall security of the cyber sector. It's mostly related to the government employees. 90% of the best experts, they work for the government today. And international support, both political and on the level of a big private business, helps us to acquire the access to all the powerful instruments such as Amazon, Microsoft, and unlike before, when there were many bureaucratic obstacles, now any request for access to their technologies takes only 1 day, and the bigger problem is the difference in time zones rather than any bureaucratic obstacles. We have all this support on international levels, all the organizations of NATO countries, Great Britain. We have full cooperation in this area. Another aspect that was demonstrated by the war is how important for us is the communication. Bring more powerful generators, we will have to maintain them, to fuel them. The carriers work on that, and they invest not some stellar funds in that, and I think that within a couple of months we will reach 100% coverage. Today we need to increase the power, the electric power independence, and to ensure the operation of the base stations in Ukraine. The operators, the carriers installed, the Kyivstar only installed 12,000 batteries with increased capacity. Vodafone installed about 10,000. The carriers work 24/7 so you could have normal communication. Thanks to our international partners, we received the necessary equipment that is being handed directly to the carriers, which is being handed to government agencies. I'm talking about SpaceX, the work of our vice prime minister who communicates directly with Elon Musk. So we are currently the country which has the largest number of Starlinks, second only to the United States. It gives us advantage both in the battlefield and to maintain communication in the critical infrastructure facilities. Also on the diplomatic level, we have to achieve the recognition of Russian Federation, a criminal state, for example, the International Union for Electric Communication, which is a bureaucratic organization and for which it takes a lot of difficulties to take a resolution. They publicized the impartial report on the scale of destruction in Ukraine. Russians had very powerful influence in that organization, but a lot of things changed after the last elections, where Russians did not make it to any of the executive bodies of the organization. So it was the result of a powerful work of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it was their merit that Russians were not elected to any management office, any management position. So is the first official
to launch attacks, and are they using essentially like what I would call hired transcripts from the hacker world that are not in the military? Do you have an estimation on the forces you're up against out of Russia?
We all have to understand and take into account that all the hackers that work with the Russian Federation, they don't even try to conceal their identities. They don't use a lot of proxy servers or some relevant equipment. They're being they're being funded by the government, the Central Intelligence Department, FSB, Armed Forces of Ukraine. So they're either on the military service or they are being funded by such military structures. Even the funds of the private sector received by corruption-based ways are assisted by the government. So they're all war criminals, and they use their skills against Ukraine during the war. They're in war with Ukraine, so they are the hackers under the control of the Russian government in any case, in all meanings of this word. We have more questions in the studio.
Steve Kleiman, Pacific Rex. I'm wondering if you could comment on offensive capabilities and if that trees up in the same command structure that that's under your authority. And secondly, you commented on the Ministry of Digital Transformation and your work in coordination with that group. I'm wondering, is that specifically with IT Army and their offensive capabilities, or are there other aspects to that relationship?
As the government agency stations of the cell carriers are now equipped with the generators, well, we can count it. It's around 5,000 base stations of the types of which are based on alternative power sources. We don't take into account LED batteries, which were holding the charge for 2 to 3 hours. I'm talking about the lithium ion, which hold the charge for 12 hours, for example, and the generators acquired by the operators. There are also many generators which are being provided by different businesses where the base stations, at whose facilities the base stations are located. So do we have any percentage? What percentage of the base stations is equipped with the generators? We have 37 base stations, including 5,000, which are equipped with the generators. Another question, excuse me, which countries does the service cooperate with they are the very same countries that help us, that support us with weapons, with humanitarian aid. It's United States, Great Britain, Sweden, Romania, Poland, Japan. We have more questions. Irina Tech Ukraine, you mentioned Amazon, Microsoft said the companies which support us from the very beginning of the invasion. Can you name more private businesses, companies, corporations this very day? Thank you. I don't want to offend anybody by forgetting them, but they are Cisco, Mendian, Ferraya, all the biggest world corporations. No big corporation is 10 companies, and you will not be mistaken if you say that they support Ukraine. Government sector, so we cooperate on the same level with everybody, because that experience that we're gaining now in Ukraine, it's been required by all the world, because no country of the world suffers such number of cyber attacks as and the diversity of types of cyber attacks, because well, obviously US is in the first place in terms of number of cyber attacks, but Russians, they test their cyber weapons here in Ukraine on different levels. Mr. Yurii, I cannot help but asking about our occupied territories. People end up in information vacuum there, specifically because the occupiers stop the operation of our cellular networks. So that said, do we have access to the occupied territories, and can we provide our people with cell network communication there? Well, if you've seen it on TV, or maybe you've seen something online, when the Ukrainian citizens on the occupied territories, they watch Ukrainian TV, and that's thanks to the work of the Ukrainian specialists who work here in Ukraine. So the first thing the occupiers do is they try to restrict the access of Ukrainians to the cellular networks, to internet. They did it when they tried to capture Kyiv region, Chernihiv region, Sumy regions. The first thing they were doing is they switched off communications so people don't get the information about what's the Ukrainians. They try to influence the Ukrainians. They try to influence the brains of Ukrainians, but they don't make it. They don't really fully understand the Ukrainians, and as a result, it's a prompt liberation of our territories. Dear friends, any more questions? Sofia Chala, TV channel Rada. I wanted to ask if our so-called allies of Russia complement to these cyber attacks committed by Russia. Well, you're probably talking about Belarus. About 90% of the cyber attacks committed against Ukrainian infrastructure.
Any number of reports on the security of Telegram and the vulnerabilities of the Telegram messaging platform. And so many Ukrainians use this platform. The military and people that are thinking about security tend to use Signal instead. I'm wondering if you view the broad use of Telegram among Ukrainian civilians as a significant vector of attack for the Russians to gather information.
Well, in no case, we don't spread any information about any messenger, about any platforms. So my recommendation is to use the messenger with the open source code. So when any IT specialist can check the ways of access to your phone, of messenger is the Signal you mentioned, or Briar, for example, and other messengers. I'm sure that you use Telegram as well, but it does not necessarily mean that you don't trust it. There are certain issues that can be easily solved using Telegram. For example, you can check the news, but for private communication, for discussion of some confidential things, my advice is to use the open source code messengers. Mr. Yurii, last question to you. On the 24th of February, it will be the 1 year of the full-scale invasion of the occupiers to our countries. Do you forecast the growth of number of cyber attacks in view of the fact that the occupiers, they like these days, the anniversaries? Well, I would say that notwithstanding the dates, the number of cyber attacks will only grow all around the world, and the threat will grow, and the harm posed by those cyber attacks will grow. We live in the future. In fact, already 2 years ago, we would not be logistics, power grid, and that all those sectors would be potentially vulnerable. So to prevent it, we need to cooperate with our international partners, political or private. We have to create the platforms for exchanging this type of information, and to create the mechanisms which can protect the whole world. And yes, the number of cyber attacks will grow next month and further on, just until the very moment we destroy the Russian Federation. Mr. Yurii, thank you very much for helping us to get to our broadcasting, no matter all the attacks of the Russians. I'm reminding you, joining us was Yurii Shchyhol, this head of state service for special communications and information security. Dear friends, bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and work together for the victory. Glory to Ukraine.